In the last years of the 20th century, America still wanted a fairy tale. Not the old kind with castles and crowns, but the modern kind, a city street, a camera flash, a woman in a black dress, and a famous man carrying a name that felt almost royal. She steps out of a Manhattan doorway, hair pulled back, face calm, clothes so simple they seem almost defiant. No tiara, no sequins, no performance, just a white shirt, a long coat, a clean line, a silence that makes the cameras lean closer. Her name is Carolyn Bessette-Kennedy. To the public, she became the woman who completed the picture. The blonde bride, the modern icon, the final touch on a national dream. She was placed inside a story before she had the chance to tell her own. That is why her life became the last American fairy tale. But every fairy tale has a hidden cost. And Carolyn's cost was this. The more perfect she looked from the outside, the less room she had to be human on the inside. Her story is not only about beauty, marriage, fashion, or tragedy. It is about image, reputation, visibility, the terrifying moment when the world decides who you are and then punishes you for not being that person every day. The question at the center of her life is not, what was it like to marry a Kennedy? The deeper question is this: what happens when your reputation becomes larger than your identity? Long before the photographs, before the headbands, before the black slip dress and the church on a remote island, Carolyn was not a symbol. She was a girl learning how to move through rooms. She was born into an ordinary American world, not a palace, not a dynasty. There were no marble hallways waiting for her, no family crest, no cameras outside the door. Her early life had the texture of suburbs, school mornings, friendships, ambition, and quiet observation. She was not loud. She was not desperate to be seen. Her influence began in Restraint. She had the rare ability to make less feel like more. Even before the world knew her name, people remembered her presence. Not because she demanded attention, but because she seemed to understand attention. That is a different kind of power. Every fairy tale begins before anyone calls it one. For Carolyn, it began quietly, not with fame, but with self-command. New York, in the early 1990s, had its own kind of royalty. The city was sharp, restless, glamorous, and unforgiving. Fashion houses were not just selling clothes, they were selling identities. Calvin Klein was not merely a brand. It was an atmosphere, clean, controlled, minimal, sensual, without shouting. Carolyn entered that world and understood it instinctively. She learned that image is not decoration. Image is communication. Somewhere in that world, Carolyn developed the language she would later become known for: simplicity, precision, control. The public would later call it elegance. But elegance was not just what she wore, it was how she edited. She removed the unnecessary. She avoided the obvious. She understood that the strongest image is often the one that leaves space around itself. This is why her style still feels modern. It was not built on trends. It was built on refusal. Refusal to over-decorate. Refusal to chase approval. Refusal to look like she was trying too hard. But there is a quiet irony here. The very restraint that made Carolyn magnetic would later make her unreadable to the public. And what the public cannot read, it often begins to suspect. Then came John. John F. Kennedy Jr. was not simply a man. He was a national memory walking through modern life. To strangers, he carried history in his face. He was the child who saluted a coffin, the son of a president, the handsome survivor of a family story America had turned into mythology. Before he could become himself, he had become everyone's symbol of unfinished promise. When Carolyn met him, she was not meeting only John. She was meeting the weight around him. Their attraction belonged to them, but the meaning of their relationship quickly belonged to everyone else. The son of Camelot meets the woman of minimalist beauty. A public prince chooses a private queen. The American fairy tale gets its final bride. That was the story people wanted. And once people wanted it, Carolyn became trapped inside it. This is the danger of becoming a symbol. People stop asking what you feel. They start asking what you represent. The wedding felt like a scene written for legend. Not a ballroom in front of hundreds, not a public spectacle, not a televised ceremony designed for national consumption. Instead, a small group of guests, a remote island, a wooden chapel, candlelight, and a bride walking toward the man America had watched since childhood. Carolyn's wedding dress was almost shockingly simple. A slip of silk, clean lines, no heavy ornament, no royal excess. It was the opposite of what people expected from a woman marrying into one of America's most famous families. And that is why it worked. The dress did not beg for attention. It commanded it by refusing to compete. In one image, Carolyn changed the visual language of bridal elegance. She looked modern, intimate, almost private, even in a photograph that would become public forever. The secrecy that made the wedding beautiful also made the public hungry. The less people saw, the more they wanted. The more Carolyn withheld, the more the cameras hunted. The image of privacy became an invitation to invade it. After the wedding, Carolyn did not simply become a wife. She became a national curiosity. And curiosity, when fed by fame, can become a cage. Carolyn never held elected office. She never ran a company. She did not give speeches about leadership. She did not build a public platform or ask to become a role model. And yet she influenced culture. Her influence came through image, but image in the serious sense. Not vanity, not surface. Image as a form of strategic language. She wore black when others would have worn color. She chose structure when others chose decoration. She made simplicity feel expensive and privacy feel powerful. Her clothes seemed to say, "I do not need to convince you." Carolyn's elegance became influence because it created a standard. She showed that visibility does not always require volume. Sometimes the most powerful person in the photograph is the one doing the least. But this kind of image creates a dangerous expectation. If people admire you for being composed, they may resent you for showing distress. If they praise you for mystery, they may punish you for being private. If they worship your restraint, they may call you cold when you refuse to perform warmth on command. Carolyn's elegance gave her power. It also gave people a mask to place over her face. A photograph freezes a second and asks the world to turn it into a story. Carolyn's photographs became stories almost instantly. If she looked calm, she was icy. If she looked serious, she was unhappy. If she avoided the cameras, she was difficult. If she dressed perfectly, she was calculating. If she dressed casually, she was analyzed anyway. This is how public perception becomes a burden. It does not merely watch you, it translates you without permission. The world saw Carolyn walking through New York and believed it knew her, but walking past a camera is not the same as revealing a soul. The public wanted her to be graceful, grateful, stylish, serene, and endlessly available. It wanted a human being to behave like a symbol, but symbols do not get tired. Symbols do not have bad mornings. Symbols do not argue, worry, doubt, or change their minds. People do. This was the emotional trap of the last American fairy tale. The audience wanted romance, but the couple had to live reality. And reality is always more complicated than the image. To marry into a famous family is one thing. To marry into a national myth is another. Every outfit became a message. Every absence became a clue. Every expression became a theory. This is what happens when reputation grows larger than identity. The world begins to prefer the version of you it created. The real Carolyn could be funny, warm, complicated, impatient, loyal, anxious, affectionate, flawed, all the things human beings are. But the public version had to remain sleek and silent, because silence made the myth stronger. For women especially, public admiration has often come with an unspoken contract: remain desirable, composed, and legible. The moment complexity appears, admiration can quickly turn into suspicion. Carolyn lived inside that contradiction every day. The tragedy is that silence also made her easier to misunderstand. When a person speaks, people can disagree with them. When a person stays quiet, people can invent them. Carolyn's privacy was not emptiness, it was a boundary, but fame often treats boundaries like challenges. The more she tried to protect herself, the more the chase intensified. The more she resisted becoming public property, the more public property she became. And so, the fairy tale began to tighten around her. Marriage is difficult even when nobody is watching. It asks two people to change in private, to negotiate routines, to disappoint each other and return, to learn what love looks like after the beautiful entrance, after the wedding photograph, after the applause has faded. Now imagine doing that while strangers wait outside your door. Imagine an ordinary disagreement becoming a rumor, a tired expression becoming a headline, a walk down the sidewalk becoming a national mood board. John and Carolyn's marriage was treated as a symbol of glamour, but glamour is not a home. Glamour does not wash dishes, answer hard questions, or soothe anxiety at midnight. Glamour cannot protect two people from pressure. Sometimes it increases it. For John, public attention had been part of life since childhood. It was painful, but familiar. For Carolyn, the intensity was newer, sharper, and more invasive. She had understood image professionally. She had helped shape perception for others. But there is a difference between managing publicity and becoming the product consumed by it. That difference can break the spirit. The woman who once understood the power of a controlled image now found herself inside an image she could no longer control. And control had been central to her elegance. From the outside, Carolyn seemed to have everything the culture taught women to want: beauty, style, marriage to an admired man, access to elite rooms, a name that opened every door. But the outside view missed the essential question: what did all of this cost? The fairy tale version said she had been chosen. The human version asks what it feels like to be chosen by a man and then claimed by a country. The fairy tale version saw a woman elevated into history. The human version sees a woman losing the ability to walk down the street without being consumed. The fairy tale version admired her silence. The human version wonders whether silence was the only safe option left. This gap between perception and reality is where Carolyn's story becomes larger than celebrity. It becomes a warning for anyone whose image has ever outrun their inner life. Reputation can open doors. It can create influence before you say a word. It can make people listen, admire, invite, and imitate. But reputation can also become a second self, one that walks ahead of you into every room, making promises you never made. Carolyn's second self was elegant, flawless, untouchable. Her real self had to live in its shadow. By the summer of 1999, the fairy tale was already carrying a sadness the public could sense, but not fully understand. There were still photographs, still speculation, still the beauty of a couple people could not stop watching. But behind the images was pressure, and behind the pressure was exhaustion. Then came the night flight, a small plane, a summer evening, a journey toward a family wedding. John at the controls, Carolyn beside him, her sister Lauren with them. The scene is painful because it begins so ordinarily. People travel, families gather, plans are made, clothes are packed, a destination waits. But history sometimes turns on ordinary moments. Over the dark water near Martha's Vineyard, the aircraft went down. The search began, the news spread, and the country that had watched John since childhood and watched Carolyn since she became his bride was pulled into mourning. The fairy tale ended not with a closing chapter, but with an absence. No final interview, no explanation, no aging into privacy, no chance for Carolyn to grow beyond the image that had trapped her. She was 33, and because she died young, beautiful, and mysterious, the public image hardened into legend. That is another cruelty of early death. It freezes a person at the exact moment the world is most willing to mythologize them. After her death, Carolyn became even more famous as an image. Her clothes were studied. Her wedding dress was remembered. Her street style became a reference point for designers, editors, brides, and women who wanted to understand how simplicity could feel so powerful. But the renewed admiration carries a strange sadness. People still ask how to dress like her. Fewer ask what it cost to be looked at that way. The danger of turning Carolyn into a style icon only is that it repeats the very mistake her life reveals. It takes the photograph and mistakes it for the person. Her style mattered. It still matters. But not because it was perfect. It mattered because it expressed a woman trying to maintain authorship over herself in a world determined to narrate her from the outside. Every clean line was a boundary. History often remembers how influential women looked before it asks how they lived. Carolyn's legacy quietly challenges that habit. Her style became famous, but her deeper achievement was her determination to preserve an inner life that could not be photographed. Every restrained outfit was a refusal. Every silent walk past the cameras was an attempt to keep something private. That is why Carolyn remains powerful. Not because she was flawless, not because she lived a fairy tale, but because her life shows the fragility of identity under public pressure. The last American fairy tale was never really about having the perfect life. It was about how dangerous perfection can become when everyone believes you owe it to them. Carolyn Bessette-Kennedy's life is often remembered through images. The wedding dress, the blonde hair, the black coat, the city sidewalk, the hand held by John. But the leadership lesson is hidden beneath those images. She understood that presentation shapes perception. She knew that restraint can be stronger than display. She proved that elegance can influence culture without a speech, a title, or a formal position. But her life also shows the limit of image. Image can open the door, but it cannot protect the private self unless boundaries are respected. Reputation can create power, but power without agency can become a trap. Visibility can make a person admired, but admiration is not the same as understanding. This is why the core question matters. What happens when your reputation becomes larger than your identity? The answer is uncomfortable. You become easier to recognize and harder to know. You become more admired and less free. You become a symbol in other people's stories while your own story gets quieter. Carolyn's public image was powerful, but it was not her identity. Her reputation was influential, but it was not her full humanity. Her elegance was real, but it was not the whole truth. Carolyn's reputation gave her influence she never formally requested. Her elegance became a language. Her restraint became a signature. Her visibility turned her into a cultural reference point. Carolyn's life asks us to look more carefully at the people we admire. to ask what we are projecting onto them, to notice when admiration becomes ownership, to remember that the most photographed person in the room may still be the least understood. And maybe that is the final lesson. A reputation can shine, an image can influence, a symbol can live forever, but a person needs room to breathe. Perhaps the highest form of leadership is protecting that room even when the world insists on turning you into a symbol instead. Carolyn Bessette-Kennedy deserved that room, and in remembering her, we should give her what the cameras rarely did, not just attention, but humanity.